I want to illustrate one of the systems archetypes with a very simple example. Let's take some condition like my weight and some method for controlling my weight like a diet. Turns out the less food I eat, the less I weigh. That's the same. And the less I weigh, the less food I eat because I stay on my diet. And that's meant to be a reinforcing loop. And I meant to just control my weight through diet. But there's another part of this system that I'm sometimes unaware of, right? Because it turns out the lower my weight is, the lower my metabolism is. That's the same. And the lower my metabolism is, the more I weigh. That's an opposite, which makes this second loop a balancing loop. When a reinforcing loop meets a balancing loop, it's called a limit to growth structure. It's what happens when a balancing loop limits the growth of a reinforcing loop. And it turns out the leverage for changing a limit to growth structure is in the balancing loop. You can't just push harder on the reinforcing loop because the balancing loop will only push harder back, which is why anybody who knows about weight loss tells you you have to diet and exercise, or diet and take cocaine, or keep your metabolism from reacting to your diet. So let's talk about student voice. It turns out that the more you get student voice, the more aspirations work you do, because students tell you what will help them belong, what will give them with heroes. And the more you do aspirations work, the more you need student voice. And that's the aspirations framework, right, where student voice and aspirations are tied up together. But it also turns out that the more you listen to students, the less teachers feel like they're listened to in relationship to students. And the less teachers feel like they're listened to in relationship to students, the less they want you to listen to students. So it turns out that when you start doing aspirations work and student voice work, not because they're bad people, but simply because of a structural phenomena, teacher voice comes in to limit the growth of that. So the only way to sustain aspirations work and student voice work is to start listening to teachers more. Just like the only way to sustain a weight loss program is through diet and exercise. So I hope that makes sense.